We'll start with the session. We are already 6 minutes late. Welcome everyone to another session of the Dark Baithak. The Dark Review, or the Dark in its multifarious forms, was something that was started 2 years ago. It was imagined as a book review journal, but we've since expanded it to be a peer reviewed, double blind peer reviewed journal, which accepts and publishes articles, academic and otherwise, across spectrum. We're trying to build a community of readers, community of writers, people who are interested in academic conversations around society, history, culture, politics. And in extension of that hope, that project, we've also been pushing and trying to build what we call early career research, which for us is the target that we have, and it's also a goal of sorts where we want to listen to and speak of and about the work that early career researchers are doing. And therefore, within that context, we started the Dark Baithak sometime in April. We've had more than 20 sessions so far. We meet every Saturday. And every Saturday, we bring a scholar who have spent, if not more than five, at least a decade, or at least 5 years of their life working on a topic, perhaps located very closely within their PhD work. And therefore, what we have today is a very dear friend, someone I've known for almost a decade now. It seems like yesterday. But we have Dr. Vishesh Pratap Gurjar with us today, who's going to talk to us about cultural politics of caste. Vishesh has been associated with this topic forever. And some of these conversations, I remember we did as MA students at JNU. So we're also looking at someone who's both had uh, an academic, a space where he's done this academically, but also someone who comes very um, firmly from the ground, as we say it, because I was actually talking about and listening to Professor Gopal Gurus and so many others who have spoken about how theory is done in the citadels, and the real life and the politics happens on the ground. So with Vishesh, we don't have that problem because Vishesh, I'm sure, would reflect and has been reflecting on these questions from the ground. So thank you so much, Vishesh, for accepting this offer, choosing to come here and discuss your work with us, and for formal invitations because they are in order. Dr. Vishesh Pratap Gurjar is an assistant professor at the Institute of Management, Nirma University. He has earned his PhD from IIT Delhi, for which he studied the transformations within dominant caste in an urban village in Delhi. His work made him aware of emerging youth cultures, fragmented and gendered nature of urbanization, and the politics of identity construction. He recently published his work on the role of memory and nostalgia in maintaining caste identity within urban Delhi. We also have our discussant for today, Jigisha Bhargavi. Jigisha is a master student at Ambedkar University, closely is interested in questions of gender, and has been working with the Dark for over 1.5 years now. So Jigisha is here to ask some tough questions, which I hope Vishesh would be able to answer. The format is that the speaker speaks for about 25 to 30 minutes, followed by discussion comments. And then we'll have question and answer session. Vishesh is also a proud and happy father, and we can hear his children. And often that also helps kind of break gendered norms because it's usually mothers who kind of feel the burden, but we'll probably find Vishesh entertaining his daughters as well while he's presenting. So that would also be a new change for us. On that note, Vishesh, over to you, 30 minutes, and then we'll followed by Jigisha's comments and then question answer sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you so much.
we'd like to thank Sanjukta Nath for being a last moment savior and helping the PPT work for us.
Thank you so much, Jigyasa. As you can see, like I have put her to sleep with just before joining, and now she is here. So I'll just put her up here so that she can just say hi. Okay. Now you go. Say hi.
Hello.
Okay.
She doesn't know us. She's making very strange faces, but hello.
Apples. So chalo jao. So so yes. So thank you, I mean, for the generous introduction, and taking me back to JNU once again. I remember distinctly our first class when Professor Thakur asked, who you are and what do you do and what are your interests. So I remember very vividly. I said I am interested in caste, and Professor Thakur said, "Then you must have already guessed my caste." So I said, "Yes, I probably have, but maybe I am wrong about it." And it does go my the engagement with the caste issues. I think it stretched far back than the formal education, as you yourself has pointed out. But with the kind of formalization of studies, I think one has to really learn how to put the experience, the perception of a person through theoretical models. So I was for last 5 7 years probably doing that, getting a degree from some reputed institute, so that my kind of argument stays valid. So partly what I am going to share here is the result of my engagement both academically and as well as socially, as you yourself pointed out. I have been engaged with a large number of caste associations at the ground, and I have seen in and out how they function, what they do, what kind of an elite formation happens within the caste associations. Uh, I have been, so to say, lucky, or I had the fortune to be part of this digital social mobilization, because one of the caste association literally began from my home in the drawing room where my father kind of led one of the digital social association of caste. So I have seen how they build, how different kind of people can come and go, with what kind of reasons they join, and why do they go if they have to go. So with that kind of background, can another slide please? I'm sorry, I have to do it again and again. But the background of this kind of reflection on caste is, I do. I mean, let me give a disclaimer before that. Before I get into a problem, the disclaimer is I am not denying that caste is hierarchy-based, sort of rank-based social stratification, right? It is a system of political economy. It is a social division for sure. But very recently, we have seen that caste communities have also made attempts to present themselves as cultural entities. And not I'm not yet sure if we can, if we can believe this claim of the communities that they are cultural communities, right? Although we are, I mean, some people might say that we are no one to judge them. They have every right to say that they are cultural communities. But I mean, then we will be like denying the entire scholarship on the issue of caste itself. So I am struggling with this problem of, if a caste is saying that they are cultural group, if a caste is making a claim that they are a sort of esoteric cultural entity, then how to evaluate the culturalness of the caste, right? So this is where probably I began, and where I came from to this topic. I came from my background in an urban village. Basically, I went to an urban village for 1 year. I studied how the young people in urban villages are trying to continue with the practices of caste. How do they associate? Why caste survived in urban spaces like Delhi? So I went to a village near Apollo in Delhi for my study, where I stayed for entire year with them, and then studied the kind of everyday reality that people live with, and in that everydayness, how caste itself emerges. Like it emerges in your interactions with migrants, it emerges in your control over women, it emerges in your networks of business, etc., etc. So then there I realized that caste is probably no more the same ritualized hierarchy as it is once studied. It has taken its new form with the urban interaction and with the urban impact. I don't know, I mean, impact, if it is at all acceptable nowadays. But yes, with the urban impact, the caste has kind of transformed its shape and form. And then comes this another sort of impactful thing, which is called the digitalization and emergence of a digital social sphere. How does that digital social sphere kind of changed the way people associated with caste. So on the ground, I saw many things where I could, simply write that caste is no longer working. Caste is no more there as a social institution, as a hierarchical, rank-based institution, because there are no more, there are no more rank-based occupations. There are no more, restrictions on practicing the kind of occupation you want to practice. There is no necessary compulsive, order which will force you to take your professional roles that you were once supposed to take, even though by the legitimate use of scriptures. There is no such thing that I found in the field. But then there is this newer kind of associative life that caste have kind of made real in the digital world, at least, if not in the real world. In the digital world, we see a lot of cultural material being put out. Each and every caste is doing it. It's not just that the caste that I studied, they were really interested in making songs about their caste, or they were the people who were more interested in putting out cultural resource, etc. Almost every caste that had, individuals of every caste probably were out there and making certain resources that partly belonged to their real world, but later on certain newer things were enveloped to the already existing culture of caste. And uh, there is now then a vast amount of resource that is available digitally and so in social media, which have become the hallmark of caste identity. Like for a large number of individuals, what it means to be belonging to a caste simply comes directly from that social media or cultural artifact that I call, right. They have defined their identity. So if you ask, like in villages with the young adolescent age boys who have actually not seen the Jajmani system of caste, who have never had an experience of how caste socially would have worked, their idea of who they are in the sense of caste subject or caste beings, or as a subject of experience of caste, is coming directly from the social media. So social media identity sort of become then the modular form of identity with which the younger generation have been working. And most of my engagement in the village was also with the younger population. Not that I did not go and sat with the older age population, I did. And yes, there exists a large gap between the mindset of these two generations within the same caste. One would hold caste in the very old-fashioned relationship, kinship-based, associative, form of life, and the younger ones would associate caste in a more, in a more ephemeral, sophisticated way of associating with something that is commonly that is a common form of heritage or lineage, whatever, right. They are unclear, basically, as much as my thoughts are unclear about it. They were very much unclear, about it. What I can't put a name to it, but yes. Then I said in my thesis, it is caste like community, right. Caste is now slowly, gradually transforming as a form of community. It probably was always there as a form of community, but there were signs, there were symbols, and there were face-to-face relations with which the older generation, kind of made the caste or practice the caste as community. But the newer generation do not have anything in the form of material relations or kinship structures to practice caste as community. It's just much of the caste in for this generation is in the form of memory and nostalgia. Therefore, so I found that to how to understand then this this kind of twin realities, where what I saw in the real world is the fragmentary nature of caste. Within caste itself, there is so much of fragmentation. There is so less of caste that you get to see, right. What you see is more of individualized, family oriented behavior of people, right, rather than caste in their everyday practice. Yet and on the other hand, what you see in the digital social world is this gigantic formation of caste identity, where everybody is boasting about their past history, culture, and then taking cues of how to be an ideal subject of caste, right. So this is where I kind of found literature on nostalgia, memory, identity making, and much of the works of people like Stuart Hall, who had worked on ideas of representation and how representation happen. I've just been reading Stuart Hall's a lot of work, like his book on new ethnicity. So the problem that that he was dealing with, how how media represents a culture. Then in representations of media, culture is always represented as unified, whereas it is not as much unified on the ground. And there is always a selective aspect of culture that gets represented, and some of it is always hidden, never represented, never talked about. So so therefore, much of my thinking on the issue of cultural politics of caste in contemporary India, comes from the cultural studies, especially the Birmingham School led by Stuart Hall, and the memory studies area, where people have been working on construction of identity in the form of with the use of memory and nostalgia. So these two became then my trope of dealing with the question of cultural politics of caste. Why cultural uh, politics? Who does it benefit? What kind of culture we are talking about? All of it is then is then become it then become a question to answer, right? So I'm not also saying that there was no culture that these castes practice, right? There was always certain amount of culture, certain elements of culture that these castes practice, but they were not explicit to caste only, right? They were partly cultures of the region. This is the argument I am trying to make, that they were cultures of the region, and almost probably, you know, almost every caste in the region then therefore had those cultures practiced. The culture of the region was also mediated through language. So, if you were supposed to be living in Western Uttar Pradesh or parts of Haryana, then probably you will find that the culture of various castes living in these different regions would probably be similar, or in close similarity to each other. There were hardly no, there were differences, but only of nuances, not of the real substance, right? There would be songs which would be performed at the birth of child. There would be songs that would be performed at marriage rituals, and then the way death, the normal life cycle culture that we get to see in normal tribal features of caste, right? Almost all castes. I don't know. I mean, this is again another theory that I'm working with. How far can we go back in time and put a date when caste kind of became uh, rank social rank became ranked social status rather than being tribes, or whether there is even a link or not. So I'm confused about a lot of things, but as much as the more confused we are, I think the better, right? So I think this is in this sense that this is in this sense that I began to see what kind of cultures were already existing with these communities, right, in different regions. So in today's presentation, you will see a lot of cultural resource in the form of singing. And by the way, much of these communities, I work with the Gurjar community. Much of the community is oral community, right? They didn't have the practice of writing. Much of their songs are passed down to newer generations, both men and women, through the practice or through the oral practice. There is no one writing these songs, keeping them as a record. But as you grow and become part of the community, as you learn to participate in various rituals of death, marriage, uh, festivals, etc., you learn them. You kind of imbibe them. So much of these songs were oral and not in the written form. But there are also things that communities sort of took with themselves. Like there is in the can I have the next slide, please? In the Western Uttar Pradesh, you have this tradition of Ragini, which is also present in Haryana, I'm sure. And if you one has to, if one goes back to study the practice of Ragini itself, which there's another person, Peter Manuel, I think, right? I'm forgetting his actual name, but the book that he wrote is Cassette Culture, and in that book he discarded, uh, you know, uh, more than discard, he just sidelined these cultures as known folk cultures, or also cultures that are non-classical. So it's half-baked culture, right? The Ragini sort of things is half-baked culture. Again, I mean, there may be a pejorative sense कि भाई तुम लोग तो, if this is an oral community, it's not classical, it's not, folk in the tribal sense. Then somewhere I think that also hints with the liminality of the caste that I'm talking about. The caste, Gurjars, Jats, Yadavs, mostly these castes, do not find exact need, mention either in the hierarchy or in the folk classic tradition. Where do their works basically fit? Are they classical works? No, for sure. Are they works of folk? There are doubts. But people, where people would love to believe that these are their folk culture, right? These are what they have been living with. This is what they have been transferred with as living beings. So in that sense, I stand with the community. Yes, these should be uh, taken up as folk culture. So Ragini tradition is one tradition that existed among the individuals. I don't know if it was existing like since very long, but whenever the culture was born, and with the arrival of cassette culture, it kind of also became easy to distribute it even in the wider region, right? So the Ragini culture kind of signifies the common public knowledge, right? So most of the Raginis that you hear would probably talk about right and wrong, right? There are strong moral judgments in Ragini tradition, and there are also, they were taken as a value system in themselves. Who are, these Raginis would, probably tell you about the value system that your caste keeps, right? So they will be about patriarchy for sure. They will be about, a subtle masculine way of being a caste man, right? But they were taken as our own folk songs. So the Ragini tradition is one sort of tradition that you find existing in the digital sphere. Much of the world in much of the songs that comes from the Gurjars caste are centered around Ragini. Then there are other familial and marriage ritualistic geets which are performed largely by women, and there is entire study done by Prem Chaudhary in context of Haryana, how even these geets were like they were used as subversive mediums of averting male gaze, male domination in society. So we know that. So this is also part of the folk tradition. This is also part of the cultural artifact that have now become part of the digital social sphere. They are largely performed by women. Then there is this new kind of production that began to happen probably after the arrival of internet, and mostly the free internet. The YouTube became popular around 2013, right? And the cheap data availability unlocked a huge potential among the young generation to produce songs and to write their own songs, even though one might judge the writing as very, very elementary, very basic. But the fact is that these writers or these young generation song producers were writing in some sort of an angst against the society. They are writing to say that I am not this. Please don't categorize me this in this manner. I am something different. So they're in their head probably they had the rank system of caste. There is always someone who is sitting on the top, which these songs want, which the leader in the song probably want to de-seat, or want to done away with, and want to claim himself as superior than them, right? So it's very interesting how these songs actually focus exclusively on identity and masculinity. So there are a lot of songs you can just search Gurjar song on YouTube, and thousands of songs will be there, especially coming from the Western Uttar Pradesh, Haryana region. These songs work on the basis of identity itself, right? What, who is a Gurjar? What kind of a you know men Gurjar men are, and what kind of you know uh, how to be a Gurjar man probably. That is what they kind of tell us through their through their content. And there is heavy reliance, by the way, on the violence, right? Uh, all these all these songs, if you analyze their content, much of the songs, they will project Gurjars as a courageous community, a powerful community, a community that will always be loyal to country, always be loyal to friends, and ready for violence, right? So this is they are largely the content of these newer generational songs, which is a shift, quite a shift from the moralistic Ragini tradition, which is right and wrong, and where in fact Ragini tradition was much more inclusive, in the sense that even women would go and listen to Ragnis, right? The content of the Ragnis was such that they were low lok tat. Lok tat means the common public truth, right? Which everyone should know, right? If you want to live a life in your in village, ideal life in village, then you should abide by these public truths, right? So this is quite a lot of difference I have seen in these two traditions. So and by the way, I use Svetlana Boehm's uh, distinction between restorative and reflective nostalgia, right? So in restorative nostalgia, the newer generation people are kind of trying to make up image of community, right? In reflective nostalgia, people from the older generation probably used to carry on with their traditions, or kind of reflect back on their life of community. So these are just two kind of conceptual differentiation that I could make. I may be completely wrong in this conceptual differentiation. Nevertheless, I didn't find anything, so I have to put some theoretical baggage here, so I put it right. So next, please. Thank you. Yes. So in Haryana, you have a lot of regions, right? So in southeast Haryana and regions of Batner of Uttar Pradesh, there are competitions around festivals. So like during the Holi time, there were festivals. In the Holi festival, there would be competitions of chopi, meaning quadruplets, four simple lines that would sarcastically humiliate an opponent who is also a singer or who is also tukia. That tukbandi tradition is very famous in the traditional sense, right? Uh, they were devotional as well. Partly, the local gods, they are devoted to local gods. Some of them also are very witty performances. So the tukia, or the artist, creates impromptu quadruplets to defeat the opponent, and they are recorded, and as they are performed live, and the recordings therefore then are put on the YouTube channel. So we have this tradition which exists on the ground actually, right? And this is now just digitalized. There are no good tukyas also. I've talked to a person who used to do tukbandi in but he sadly lost his power to hear, so he can't perform anymore. And a lot of younger generation are anyway not interested in tukya, or tukbandi tradition. So this art is dying, in the sense the communities, older people relish it, but the younger ones, there are hardly any takers. So and around the Tukbandi tradition, there was then this beating of the Nagaras, right, in every village center. So village is part of the village center in many regions. So in the village center, there would be bigger Nagaras that would be played around Holi or Deepavali, and these communities would come together as part of the group of villages and then perform these songs. Then from Haryana, we see that there is a new wave of singers that are coming up, right? Based on the the fashion that Haryanvi language has become right now, right? They have utilized this very aptly, and they are doing rap also in Haryanvi language. And what is the content of their songs? So there is this person you can see here. He won this Hustle 2.0 MC Square, right? He comes from Faridabad. Uh, he's writing songs around the Gurjar lifestyle, right? How to be a, how he lived his life as a Gurjar, how he is a pinned person, how is a village person, and how simplistic life his community have back home in village, right? He's in Mumbai. He is meeting girls here and there, and he's trying to not get impressed, or not get entangled in the urban life. So much of the songs in of this kind rely on this rural urban divide between the and rural urban divide that the community is still trying to deal with, right? If you ask a Gurjar in any of the cities, nearing the uh, center, which is Delhi, you will find that they will hardly be able to define themselves as urban, and they would still be categorizing themselves as rural, not because they want to remain rural forever, perhaps, but the urban itself is exclusionary, right? Who can be urban is a privilege of certain caste in India, right? So that is probably the reason that if you are not accepted up there, you take a downturn and you know hold on to your roots much more strongly than ever. So that is probably what he is trying to do through his songs, and thereby he essentializes the identity of a Gurjar as a rural identity only. A Gurjar is only and only one which has rural roots, right? If you don't have rural roots, you can't be a Gurjar. In his content, in his songs, I find that. Can I go to the next page, please? Okay, Rajasthan. It's an interesting cultural landscape for Gurjars. The Gurjars' political economy, politically and economically, are not as affluent as a politically organized community as they are in parts of Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. So in Rajasthan, we have an older tradition. Like there are in the reflective tradition, we have these devotional songs that are centered around Bhagwan Devanarayan. Right, Bhagwan Devanarayan is someone who is considered as Vishnu's avatar, who was born into Gurjar caste, and devotional songs are centered around his life. In his his story is told through Fud. Fud is basically something which is an art form which tells the story of God on a plain, large plain cloth. So you see a artist here, and in the backdrop you see the Fud, where the life story of Bhagwan Dev Narayan is depicted, right? So it's a mix of art and song, sort of mix of art and song. The songs are usually sung by a bhopa. Bhopa means pujari in Rajasthan. So this person here was very famous for his rendition of the Dev Narayan Phat. These renditions then later on were recorded by some people and put onto YouTube. So these songs are available on YouTube also. So, and then on the newer side, the younger generation, the Gurjar artists have utilized the tradition of Rasya. Rasya is more of a romantic songs, right? And they are not particularly coming from the Gurjar caste. They are regional songs of the I don't know how to what is the name of the region? Like Bhatner is the region in Noida. There is a region where Bharatpur, Agra,
Braj. Braj.
huh? Braj Pradesh maybe, huh? Braj. In Braj, there is a tradition of singing Rasya, and most of other castes also have these Rasyas, and there are stories of romance, right? There are stories where a wife would complain, a migrant husband who is driving a truck or maybe earning his bread for the family somewhere away to bring some gifts back home when he comes, right? When he returns. So in this Rasya tradition also, there are then newer songs which are produced on the uh, you know knock joke, literally on the knock joke of husband wife, girlfriend boyfriend, or the newer songs are also centered around the identity of Gurjar men, trying to earn hard money, and the theme are running from rurality to the behavior of a migrant in the city, and how then this migrant reflect back on his rural condition, right? So I see a lot of these Rasyas being played now when I roam around in Ahmedabad among the Gurjar setup. So there are a lot of Gurjars in Ahmedabad which have migrated from southern part of Rajasthan, right? And they have their own setups, like the tea shop or pawn shop or many other things, right? And they have put a a little screen up there, and the entire day probably, if you go on any time of the day, you will find these Russias playing. So there is that sense among the migrants, that that these songs feeds to. What is the life of a migrant Gurjar of Rajasthan away from his home, right? And then what is the result of it? So these kind of songs kind of have the content which is mostly romantic type of content. Yes, can next slide, please. Yes. Then comes the region of Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir. So in Punjab, there are Gurjars in district of Hoshiarpur, Balachor, some places. We have a small minor Gurjar population, relatively very less compared to the Jats. And the music industry in Punjab is literally centered around the Jat identity, right? So the songs of the Gurjar caste, therefore, in Punjabi language, comes in response to the dominance of the Jat community in the songs, right? So you have a lot of young Gurjars singers and writers who are writing on the Gurjar identity in Punjabi language, right? And these are also available in YouTube. I don't know. I have not found anything in the traditional form from this region, right? Punjab. Say what are the traditional songs? Maybe they also have their marriage songs. They also have their songs around birth and other sort of ritual. But I didn't come across, and I have to maybe do a more field research in Punjab to find out. But the younger ones, the new songs, are sort of centered around the identity to deal with the dominance of the Jat identity. Then in the Kashmir, I found that there are songs that are traditionally practiced by the Muslim Gurjars, right? So these songs are called the Baids. So like the Hindu Gurjars in the northwest part or the western part of the country, uh, Kashmiri Muslim women also perform songs during marriage, right? They are not called Baids. They are called something different, but I don't know what they are called, right? So they also perform these songs. They perform the song when a person is going to marry outside, and they are performed around the birth as well. So these are traditional songs, right? But they are now being uh, rechannelized into and put on to YouTube and social media. A lot of young artists are also coming up and practicing bath. So the the bath is it is sung in the Gojari language. You know, eh, although the Gurjars of all of India, they say that they have their own language, right? But much of their language draws from the nearby regions in which they have been populated. It is only in Kashmir that we find the mention of Gojari language, right? It is a language which is also scheduled language in the form that people have course running, universities have course running on Gujari language. So it is a language of art and literature per se. But the problem with Gojari language in Kashmir is it is written in not there. It is not written in Devanagari script. It is written in some Urdu. I think it is written in Urdu or the Arabic script, which makes it difficult for the rest of the Gurjar community in other parts of the country to read and engage with. But the way it is spoken, if you speak slowly, a person from the northwest, a Hindu person from the northwest, could easily understand it. Right? There is hardly any there are many words that they have invented of their own, but the way, the tone, the reflection, the strong stress you place on words is essentially same even in the Gurjari language in Kashmir. So these bets are artistic expression of a life of nomad. So much of the Gurjars in Jammu and Kashmir, except parts of Rajouri and Punch, they still practice transhumance. They are still living a tribal way of life, right? They live their life around buffaloes, sheep, and nature, right? And much of the beds are therefore centered around this aspect of you know a nomad, a life of nomad, the beauty of nature, along with obviously romantic and songs of longing that Beth become sometimes. There are these there are these songs that that kind of uh, that kind of essentialize Gujar's identity as that of a nomad in Kashmir. So that is something that I think completes the kind of catalog of songs that are available. But the question that remains to be answered after going with so much of songs that are available before us, I think is why these songs are produced, a, and why they are rehashed and put on to the digital social medium. Uh, what is their link with caste identity? What is it that these songs are trying to do? Right? And now that they are on YouTube, now that they are on the digital social sphere as such, what is it that these songs kind of do for the caste identity? What kind of caste identity becomes visible through these songs? So certainly, I mean, in any as it will happen in any representative form of culture, these songs are trying to give a monolithic identity to caste which is not as unified, which is not as homogeneous on the ground as it is projected to be in these songs, right? And these songs are, I think, are also a reflection of the community's rise. And when I say community rise, I mean the rise of the elites in the community, the rise of a stronger middle class, the rise of certain elite groups in the community who are now in power, who are now in politics, and who want to remain as successful politicians in the community. So, in this sense, I believe that the cultural reproduction of caste is essentially a work of weaker sections of caste, but at the behest of the richer section, right? So the richer sections becomes the motivators, the sort of uh, the one who provides for the support for this kind of cultural reproduction of caste because of culture, because this cultural reproduction essentially produce a monolithic homogeneous identity which will then be easy to mobilize also in real sense. So I think this is where the where the arguments stand as of now, right? The production largely happens via people who are ordinary, who are looking for employment, maybe who are interested in showcasing their art and express their feelings around caste through songs. But who benefits after all, right? What is the benefit that these songs gives to which is the category among the caste group that gets the best of the benefits of these songs? I think this is mostly the politically motivated and urbanizing middle classes of the caste that kind of feel uh, a kind of solace in the form that some of these songs give a nostalgic feel to the already urbanized Gurjars, and the political people kind of get a surety that their efforts in politics are supported by a homogeneous monolithic group which is Gurjar or caste, right? So yeah, that is it. I think I'll stop here and maybe discuss more in question answers.
Thank you
Thank
so much. Thank you so much. Very, very engaging, very interesting. I didn't know of the what I found new was the cultural in Punjab, uh,
you.
and the response that Gujars are having against what saying. I wasn't aware of that. The rest I've heard of. So good. Something that I learned today. But I will come with my own set of questions.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's piqued interest. In fact, while you were speaking, we had a comment
Mm.
which came in your direction. I don't think I can see it. Can we still see that? No, I can't see it right now. But we'll come to it. Jigisha, your quick comment.
Thank you, Dr. Gurjar. I learned a lot with the presentation, and of course, it has lot of research nudges. So, thank you for that. Your paper, like the in the memory studies on the village, so it's titled "Making the Village Alive in the City," was also very lucid, and it again also made me acquaint with an area of study that I like I have not interacted much, so thank you for that. I have three quick questions. First, I want to talk about the concept of nostalgia.
Right.
So, you talked about this generational shift that there is, right? So, the elder members are carrying this nostalgia in terms of like being like the example is there in the paper where they want to name the streets on the name of freedom fighters, right? But the younger generation, I see, is more aggressive with this memory.
Hmm.
So, and this cultural memory is being reconfigured by this digital media, of course. So my question is it actually nostalgia? Because I see a kind of an element of fantasy coming in with cars, with a kind of audio style, with this hip hop punk style of rapping, with a kind of the camera movements and everything. So is it actually nostalgia? Because it hasn't happened before, right? So
Hmm. Right.
all of this was more of a fantasy, a caste aspiration, maybe.
Hmm.
On that conceptually, or is this just like two different types of nostalgias? Like one is like like for the older generation, it's more rural
Just
and
hold
lived,
it at.
or for the younger generation, it's more performative. What
Correct.
is it? Uh, do you want me to go through
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
the
Please.
questions and then
Yeah.
you please? Oh, all right. So
Yeah, you, Jigusha, maybe
this
you send all your questions together and then we can ask Dr. Gurjar to answer all of them because I also see messages in the chat box. So you go ahead and ask all your three questions.
sure. The second question is on the understanding of this youth of the digital space. Digital presence is serving these two motives, as you said in your paper, right? It is for communication between the villagers, but it is also for, of course, assertion of identity. So, so while materially they are quote unquote being emasculated by the authorities or the resident welfare organization, they are putting an excessively masculine front in the digital space. Like in the YouTube video of which I saw, like the name, uh, uh, titling it as cheetah, Madanpur ke cheetah, and all of this are excessively masculine, right?
Right.
So, is there a sensibility working which does not see virtual as a complementary to the real? Uh, so, like, does it see it like the virtual is as real?
Hmm.
So, my they do the way I see it is that they don't see it happening the virtual. So, like, if they don't get that space in the social,
Hmm.
they are using the virtual, and the virtual is not an alternative. It is as legitimate and it is as important. It's as actual as the like the
Jiggy sir,
virtual is as
give me just
actual.
1 minute. I'll be back. Just 1 minute.
We're very sorry, Jigisha. I think, uh, yeah, making space for uh, platform, making space for parenting. So that's what this is. Meanwhile, if you have questions, friends, please put them in the chat box, or if you want to speak your question out loud, that is also possible.
Sorry, sorry, sorry. Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
The
So
virtual,
the second
yes,
question
Jigisha.
was
The virtual and
that
the real. Yeah.
yeah. So this is the assertion of identity in the virtual an alternative to the real, or is it complementary in their psyche?
Hmm. Hmm.
The last question. Uh, so, of course, one of the definite conclusions from your paper was that urban planning creates gated communities. But caste as a community has also long practiced exclusion, right? Now, I don't know about the caste composition of the village, Madanpur Khasdar, but it's very much visible that women are not there in the public sphere, in the videos, or even, I mean, I don't know about your entire research, but in the field notes that you shared, there was no woman voice coming in, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, these caste communities are also practicing some kind of restriction to the access to the public space, right? So, is there any interaction between these two logics of planning, where, like the one where there is this infrastructural gate based on the
Right.
logic of security, and then there is the social gate based on the
Right.
logic of hierarchy or custom.
Right.
These are my three questions. I
Very
also
good.
have a slight fourth
Yeah, yeah, more,
question, but
please.
I'll hold that back for
No, it's
now.
okay. It's okay. You
Yeah.
can. Okay. There is no problem. So thank you, Jigesh. I mean, these are three very interesting and thought-provoking questions in themselves, and you can expect this kind of a response only from the the Delhi kind of intellectual culture. Whenever I present somewhere outside, I somehow get different kind of questions which do not excite me. So thank you for kind of giving me these thought-provoking questions. The first question is they have not lived it, and whether it is right to call it nostalgia or not. The nostalgia is of the older generation, right? And it is not the older generation which is trying to name or rename the street on the names of their forefathers. It is the younger generation actually. It is the attempt of the younger generation to you know to restore sort of. There is that sense of restoration, and the way you said it, it's partly the emasculated masculinity of these older generation that the younger generation actually don't like, right? You could not even protect your land from the government. How dare and then there is that generational shift that I talked about. There is an anger among the young generation towards the older generation because of the loss of land and livelihood and control thereby, that they could not control, and therefore the net result is much more masculinity in the younger generation. So yes, these are the two things are definitely related. Why I call it nostalgia? I told you again. I mean, there was no other sort of trope that I found relevant to make sense of why this younger person who has not lived caste in the way his forefather have lived, why does he sort of so hell bent on uh, making his effort in memorializing caste? So what could it be? Could be a the only reason I see is that maybe it is for evoking some kind of nostalgia, keeping the community always in the loop of memory, right? So you never know whose memory then is it. Is it the memory of my father or my own, right? So that is the kind of. So I think my response answers both of your question. Why masculinity? Because you yourself said in the past they have their past generation is probably they could not stand against the state government, the developmental work that the government did, and every new generation also has this sort of sort of their own uh, self-made belief that they are better than the previous ones. So that is also present among the younger generation, and that is also fueling their efforts towards more masculinity, towards more violence. Their reliance on violence is essentially because they think that they've lost control, right? And because the previous generation was not strong, they have to be stronger, right? That is, and they have to be stronger in both sense. They have to control women more often and regularly, and they have to also be violent towards probably others, right? Who are migrants, who are who could be risk to the women in general and the society and community in general. So that masculinity comes from this self-realization of sort among the young generation, right? The third question, control over women, and my response is so. As you can see, and I mean, if you go to a village, especially the urban village, women would hardly be found on public spaces. There are no women on public spaces except on purpose, right? They are either going to some house. They are either going to some marriage function, some sangeet, or some work in market, right? They are always probably with. They are always two. There is no single woman that is roaming around freely, accessing the public space like you can access in cities, right? They are probably out there on purpose. As I told you, they are either going for work, doing some, fetching something from the market, and younger women older than 25 years of age, especially in the urban village I worked, were difficult to find. They were all married and sent off to their homes, so to say, right? So so that is the reality of urban village and caste today. That, like you very rightly pointed out, are there any mutual is there any mutual understanding between the gated community, the logic of infrastructure in the form of gated community and social control? I don't think there has been any sort of tacit consent. It is just about control, right? Who can control whom, right? So the urban dwellers want to control the villagers. The men in the village want to control the women of the village. So that is the only uh, commonness I found there. And the control over women is what the younger and the community believe is necessary for the protection of community. They don't say it out loud, but there is that, there is that what do you say? I mean, there is that common thought among the community that if you don't control your women, you are going to lose as a community. And they give example of the communities where women are getting more women are getting married outside the community as a weak community, as a community on decline. So that is there. That is there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vishesh. I would say they were very sharp questions.
Yes, absolutely.
And it almost felt like we're now up for a very difficult task, but you've answered all of them. And we now have, if you have questions, please kind of give us an indication. But we have like a long message in the chat box.
Yeah,
Sahil,
share
yeah.
value
Um,
transform a song and past identity is also carried from it to the modern surrounding. Right. Right. That is what I'm also trying to say. That caste, modular form of caste identity is being presented through these songs, modern songs. In the institution, if people get to know that a person is from a certain caste like this, or whatever conception they have of their caste, they will just put it on that person and they'll press upon many times. So, so I don't know, Sahil, actually, when will this come to an end? I mean, all sorts of, there is this, then, I mean, uh, stereotypes, they have very strange sort of strange way of working. So strange way of working in the sense that they are harmful to the members who don't subscribe to the stereotypes or who do not fit with the stereotypes. But stereotypes originate from some elements of truth. Just because there has been somebody who was conservative, just because there has been someone who was less open-minded, just because there was someone who was against women, the experience of that one person probably kind of motivate people to also uh, bundle up others who are not like them, just like them. So stereotypes are partly true, partly false. That is where I stand. Right? They are partly true, partly false. Partly true because there is a reason some people are saying you anti-feminist. They have had their own experience. So how do you deal with it? I think it's a question we have to probably, uh, decide by more engagement with people, right? But community is trying to fight this stereotype. The more they fight this stereotype, the more they get stereotyped. That is also a thing, right? The more you try to say I'm not anti-feminist, then somebody will do something in your community, and you will again be in that you know sort of bind. So that is it.
any, okay. Sakshi Badba has a question. I'm going to read it out loud for everybody who's not probably reading the text. Thank you for enriching session. Could you please shed some light on how the regional identity expressed through songs speaks to the larger Hindu nationalist discourse? Uh, is there a similar national regional divide like the urban rural one that you pointed out?
Yes. So a large number of the Hindu Gurjars are, in favor of the Hinduistic nationalistic discourse. Right. There is no denying the fact they have been voting for the BJP since 2014, yeah? And more so, there are caste associations of that are working in close relation with the idea of Hindu nationalism or Hindu nationalistic discourse. So I don't know. I mean, regional identity expressed through songs. Uh, there has been, although in these songs, I have not found very explicit mention of the Hindu nationalistic discourse. And there are Hindu nationalistic songs that are produced for sure from the people of caste, but these songs do not actually resonate with the people of caste themselves. Right? They can very easily, you know, distinguish between the wheat and the chaff. So what belongs to caste is a very is very distinctly recognized by the members as one of our own, and then something as a medium of propaganda. So there is no, there is no camouflaging possible, so to say. You cannot camouflage a Hindu nationalist agenda as the agenda of Gurjars, and then it will also be readily accepted. No, it cannot happen. It does not happen on the ground. I have seen that people don't really, really, listen to it in the manner that this is who we are, right? So it's a very interesting caste location also. They are they are Kshatriya in their own sense. Uh, the caste believe that they are a high caste, especially of the Kshatriya origin. But there are always these contestation on certain figures, uh, which the other castes also lay claim to, and they are always fighting over certain fighting over the status of these uh, uh, holder or what are icons of caste, right? So the in the iconography there is fight among the Rajputs and the Gurjars, among the other castes also. So, but in their belief, the community believe that they are of the Kshatriya origin. But I don't know. I mean, I have not found them, massively filled with this Hindu nationalistic agenda. They they have their own reasons to support this particular agenda, but they are not very organic. If that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishesh. Another very sharp question.
Yeah.
And Pratiksha, do you have one?
Yes, I
Yes.
do.
Do ask. Do ask.
Thank you, Dr. Vishesh. So I have more of, let's say, comments or something that I was thinking about. More not really questions, but please do share your opinions on this.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
First of all, yes, a small question is that did you also interact with, let's say, the comment section of these, and if you have something really interesting to share from there, I would really be because what I feel is that people, let's say people who are consuming this content who are non Gurjars and who are not from the community, but of course it has a wider reach to people who just enjoy the hip, the sound of the voice of the music, the words. It's a certain metro culture that the vocabulary of
Right.
Haryana and Rajasthan has acquired, right?
Right.
So for a non just and more popular in North, of course, where they like the accent or the dialect and certain words that these songs use, right? So that becomes a certain performative for to show assertion, to show cool, to show all these
Right.
things. So, but the contradiction that people, I think, like you might be okay to consume the content, but when you probably meet a person from the community, that idea of what someone also saying in the chat that you have these assumptions, or what your article also says, that that distinction between the city and the villager where they will not invite them home will remain. So, what is that contradiction, and how do people interact with something identity versus, like, the art and artist sort of distinction, how it is being perceived by others, and even maybe from within the community, but that class difference sort of thing. Because most of these artists, I think, are, experimental new artists coming from the grassroots and trying to sort of establish that sense of the caste pride.
Sure.
And also, is there so the way that their music, not I'm not talking about the traditional ones, but
Yes.
the new age, the new modern, young people who are experimenting with the digital public space and the social space, when they're adopting the very popular stance of videography, cinematography, right? That they're not
Hmm.
sticking to something गाँव में वो बजा रहे हैं एक तारा बजा रहे, that is not their thing now.
That's
They are
not their role.
dressed up, they have a certain light show and stage, all of this.
Right.
So
Right.
that does the digital space put this kind of I don't know if it's a pressure, but to kind of shed off that sort of skin of the villager, but also appear modern, but talk about the village. You know,
Yes, I get it.
that's something also I think, I mean, I would like to know because there's a song, it's Gurdas Man who sings with what's this guy? The Ki Hove Duniya Da on Coke Studio.
Diljit,
हाँ,
Diljit
Yes,
Dosanjh.
Diljit, yes. And
दिलजीत.
I was very fascinated with the song, the title of the song, but when I actually heard the song, I was offended. And it's, you know, it's that kind of nostalgia that they're creating of the village life and of women and women's role and how, you know, things are changing. So, but they're using a platform like Coke Studio,
Right,
you
right.
know. So to say these stories, they're still using a very public space where they're able to say these things. So yeah, that's that.
So yeah, thank you, Pratiksha. I mean, both of your questions are really interesting. So I'll begin with the second one first. The village has, evoked a sense of nostalgia since very long. There is a sense of nostalgia built around the village, even among the academicians, right? So early village studies, you will find that much of the knowledge that they have produced about village is just the figment of their imagination. I'm, and I can name and sociologist as reputed as M.N. Srinivas, right? They have themselves produced an ideal image of village, which is nowhere to be found in India, probably, right? In at least in the unified universal sense that they were writing in their belief. So I would still like, I mean, give these young chaps some sort of leeway that if a a learned scholar trained in some foreign university can make mistake in eulogizing a village life, certainly they are doing it for their own benefit. And obviously that is where I say it is nostalgia, and that nostalgia is in that sense used very selectively for the fact that they have not lived it. They have not lived this village life. They are just they have just heard about it. They have just listened about it from their parents, forefathers, and therefore it is not probably part. It is probably not part of their memory as lived experience. It's just part of the memory handed down to them through generations, right? And in that sense, the village is reproduced through the modern art forms, modern, whatever light show and the kind of institutional requirements there are for the production of music. So the village, in that sense, is political, and because the identity that you are living with in the modern times is so closely related with your village status that the two becomes inseparable. Hmm? The two are inseparable because there is hardly any image of a Gurjar who is not a villager, right? And this is what the songs are trying to kind of objectively produce. And this is also what I call in some other paper, this is what they are doing, like the branding of caste. So the caste is no more caste now in the digital social world. It is a brand. It is a brand that you will aspire to become. It is a brand that you will would like to be associated with, right? So the caste no longer remains a caste. It becomes a brand of sort, like a big name. And therefore in the comment section I see a large number of people saying, oh bhai, what a song you have written. And I am not a Gurjar, but I love the music and I love the lyrics and the way you have said it. Interestingly, I was once in Assam, in Silchar, and I had this young women who said, Bhaiya, I listen to these songs even in Tirupura gyms. I said, what the hell? I mean, what are these Gujar songs doing in a gym in Tirupura, right? So you're right, probably that the music is so addictive. I mean, I listen to them and I myself think, have I been like less Gurjar, in my upbringing? So that kind of associative, addictive, realism they create. So that is the music, and that is how they are, put across also. No, they are put across filled with the tones of pride, male chauvinism, and that about control, about rising up, and being a name in yourself, and all that blah blah. So the content itself is so heavy. The content itself is so uh, uh, attractive that everyone would love to belong, right? I have read a lot of comments. People from different communities will comment, and sometimes, in fact, even the marginalized sections, by the way. marginalized section, people will also say, ha, it's a very good song. And you also, and then they will also paste their own link. You please also listen to my song. I have also produced something like this. So that is very interesting. In the comment section, there is and somebody I don't remember who was it, but there's someone I just recently read who said that the production is actually not from one side. The production is happening from both sides. I think it's uh, what Stuart Hall himself, right? He says that in his writing, decoding and coding, he says that medium, message, and a decoder. The decoder is not passive. The decoder is very much active, right? What he decodes, what she decodes out of the message is also then become part of the message. So that is very interesting how the comment section opens up the idea of co-production of these songs, because the more hit you get on one kind of song, the more you produce of those kinds. So it's very interesting, the world of social digital media. I don't know, I mean, we have very less methods actually which are accepted, which would accept these kind of works. But a lot of politics is revolving around this visual culture in today's time. So we have to still wait, probably. A lot more people have to come together and work on the methodologies of how to approach these songs and what to write. Much of my work also is on much more on build on insights only, insights that I know because of the kind of sociological works I have done, because of the political engagement I had. And if I have this history or past of myself, I probably would not have deduced the same thing that I'm saying right now. So, and I mean, there are softwares you can use, but there is limitation of the software. I put it in Google, and there is a software, Google Notebook LM. You can paste two links of the YouTube, and it will automatically decode the lyrics. And the conversation was fascinating, right? The two AI chatbots started to have a conversation about Gurjar song, right? And they're telling me they're really violent and they are against the law and they're anti-state. So, I mean, there is that problem associated. Uh, Once you give control to machines, they will have their own way with it, right? So I'm still thinking how to polish it more so that it becomes more easily publishable and all that. But yeah, it's not just my problem; it's problem of everyone who is trying to analyze the digital visual culture these days.
Uh,
Thank you.
Vishesh, we have Pratiksha, do you have a follow-up?
No, I think it's a longer engagement because it's fine. Thank you. It was actually very interesting way of approaching my problem. I mean, I'm thinking similarly on the methodology because, a digital space to uncover the kind of interactions by not
Mm.
being a part of it, right? You're not a part of the live conversation, but
Mm.
you're kind of at the coding end, right? You're at the receiving end of that to interpret and to add to kind of correlate it to reality. It
Right.
is something, but yeah, it's a great work. So thank you.
Thank you so
We
much.
can take a second round of questions and comments, but we still have more questions. There is a question by Afri in the chat box says, is this idea not similar to the one in Imaginary Homelands by Salman Rushdie? The
Uh,
idea of reclaiming the past not as exactly as it was, but to make sense of it through fiction, memory, and storytelling.
so, Afrin, I'm sorry, I haven't read Imaginary Homelands. So I have to read what the idea is there in the Imaginary Homeland that Salman Rushdie has used. My use of nostalgia is simply to say that you are creating something in memory that you have not lived with yourself, right? Through digital cultures. So that is where I think I'll stop in terms of my engagement with nostalgia, and also in memory. In memory, I have dealt it in more deeper sense in my other works. But nostalgia is something as a tool. It's a political tool. I mean, there is this journalist in journalist come academician in UK, Mark Fisher. He wrote this book and also give this idea of retrotopia and why nostalgia returns so heavily in liberalized world, because people kind of feel that they have reached monotonous life, and therefore nostalgia return when you have nothing to create newly. You create something out of the past. So it is in that sense the political usage of nostalgia, right? I'm saying that you are nostalgic because there is a politics of it, right? That is what I'm trying to say.
Uh, any other questions or concerns? There's a slight comment by Sahil about ancestral worship. Like,
Mhm.
he's,
Yes, I think I missed it. It was not confirmed whether perform ancestral worship in earlier times and some in modern times too, but it's fading away as people were practicing it more commonly. So the instinct of the caste could have. Sahil, in my village where I worked, the ancestral worship in the form of village god and in the form of family god is still continuing. So ancestral worship means the people who were born and then died early, they become the gods of the family, right? So Pitra Deva. So that is still practiced, at least in the village where I worked. So it will continue. Interestingly, they have placed the Devata home on the terraces now, since there are no fields where you can build these home for the family goats. So they have placed it on the rooftop. So it is interesting how newer things are being adopted, how modernity is reshaping these everyday caste reality of the past.
uh, any other questions? None? Okay. I have two very quick things to say. No, there are questions. There are questions.
Will be questions, no doubt. I
That,
mean,
I'm sure it kind of your presentation kind of invoked that kind of interest. It's a long comment, but I'll read out loud for everybody. Just a comment. The rural identity, this is Tejaswini. The rural identity being so prominently projected in songs and videos often feels disconnected from the realities of the younger video generation, many of whom neither relate to nor recognize themselves in those portrayals of rural life. As was mentioned, the support of such depictions by affluent and urban leaders seem rather superficial, even hypocritical, because while they romanticize rural life in cultural productions, in reality they're accustomed to comfort and would not want to live that way themselves. In
absolutely,
that sense, the celebration of rural identity becomes less about lived experience and more about nostalgia, which, as you pointed out, oh, so to clear political users. I think this
absolutely, absolutely correct. And if you are on the receiving end, you will see it more easily. If you are a woman from the community, you will see it more easily. So just the comment you have made, the the number of women I meet from the urban villages, they tell me this all the time. This is all politics to control us. So you're right.
okay. I have two quick, comments masquerading as questions. Okay, so my first is, and I'm drawing from fiction. I'm not a fan of, and I shouldn't say that on recorded video, but there's this concept of smara. Okay,
Hmm.
and I have come across it from Gautam Bhatia's fiction that he's written called The Wall.
Mhm.
It was a lawyer like fiction, and there were too many concepts in it, and I don't expect you to have come across this book. But it was an
Mhm.
interesting concept where he was thinking in terms of a liminal pictorial category of the
Hmm.
smara. So he
Hmm.
was saying, person, it's not memory because you haven't lived it,
Hmm.
but something from within you. So the context of the story is that one day annually,
Hmm.
citizens of the place are given a day to go to the wall, and they are free to express their angst against the state and their lives.
Hmm.
And what gets evoked is something that is an unrealized future,
Hmm.
but it comes from within you in terms of what Margaret Panna would call that the Urdu word for memory is that there is no agency to it. मुझे
Hmm.
याद करता हूँ as opposed to मुझे याद आता है.
Right.
The memory coming to you as opposed to you bringing it.
Hmm.
That's the kind of formulation. And I was wondering if you also start talking in terms of Maran as something that comes to you as opposed to you bringing it to yourself to connect these two aspirations or ways of looking at, say, the older and the newer.
Hmm.
That is one way.
Hmm.
I thought if we were to go in that direction, if that would help us. That was one,
Correct.
one kind of question slash comment. The second thing that I was thinking was also with respect to, and this comes more experientially than it comes academically to me, which is the sheer joy and accepting it online with the violence or the aggressive masculine that comes out in a language which is very familiar to you,
Mm.
right? So for the chatbot to come back and say, "Oh, this is violent. This is against the saying it's criminal." But at one point, I actually sat down and heard all Jad Gurjar songs coming from these areas. And how many times do they talk about, Khalutarna, something?
Mm. Yes, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's so familiar. It is so natural because if you come from the area, and I think probably that is what even Pratiksha was trying to hint at, is the sheer similarity and sheer, for the lack of better word, the way in which it feels almost endearing because you understand the language of the road.
Right.
You're on the road, the language you probably, if you don't speak, you want to imitate in spaces where, say, the state is absent.
Mm.
Right. So, is there a larger appeal, not just to the community, but the fact that, say, being violent or being aggressive is also a language of upward mobility? And while some women may have what you call an experience, or some marginalized sections within these groups may have an experience of, oh, my reality does not match this language.
Mm.
I find that it would be good also to investigate if there are also women and people on the other end who aspirationally look at aggression as desirable. Because my hunch is, again, a question masquerading as a as a suggestion, or vice versa, that there's a certain way in which, because of the larger context of Hindutva nationalism, but also just the absence of, the lack of better word, masculinity in the liberal discourse, right? Because there's a certain way in which liberal discourse has pushed the masculine completely to one end, and now masculine is popping up in phenomena which it didn't so much have. One of which could be the all the locker boys, conversation. Children din about the
Mm.
your locker chat rooms,
Mm.
elite, Delhi schools where you have these violent chat boxes of
Mm.
men, or private online spaces where men are speaking in
Correct.
these alternative spaces which have given way to. So, in some sense, I'm also trying to say that is it possible that there's a failure of the liberal project in terms of bringing up the masculine conversation in a way that it moved more towards solution, and instead these spaces have captured that imagination
Mm.
and are then redoing, this in various forms. You don't have to respond to it, but you might to kind of,
I like your suggestion in the first sense that the Smaran thing.
yeah,
That is something I look at for sure because nostalgia and memory are again foreign imported sort of concepts in the kind of work that I'm doing. So I'll definitely have a look at it. What is it that the author is trying to say, and if it is conceptually usable in this sense. The other question is more interesting, I guess. I mean, the promise of modernity, I feel, was that it will uh, subdue all other kind of violence except the legitimate violence of the state. But that hasn't happened, and that is not happening, right? With the rise of modernity, what we see is the commensurate rise in violence, right, against women especially, right? So the project is broader and wider than just the narrow project of nationalistic, chauvinistic, project of one caste, one community. I think the caste community becomes violent because of the very nature of modernity, which does not subdue violence, which in the name of subduing violence subdues a lot of communities as well, right? And then what happens is they return in the form of violence. So that is my probably way of comprehending the rise in violent crimes, the rise of violence in general in public. The public is impatient nowadays. You see everywhere, almost every part of the country. You see people are becoming more and more angry. And Pankaj Mishra, I think, wrote that book in the age of anger, and it's where I think it's with him I stand that modernity is probably was supposedly having this capacity to subdue all other forms of violence, but it has not been able to do. Rather, what we see is the rise of violence with modernity. More modernization, more violence, right? So, and what does modernization mean? You can contest this as well, but as far as I am concerned, more progress, more development, and more sort of efforts towards social mobility uh, kind of makes us more violent for sure. Right? If you are a person who don't want to rise, who don't want anything to do with the world, why would you be violent? You would not be violent. There is no need to be violent, right? So this pressure to rise, the pressure to arrive at some scene, the pressure to prove yourself, certainly fills us with violence, right? There is no way out, no two opinions about it. And in experience we have had this why would you be in a rush to kill or to to hate somebody, because someone on the other side is blocking your way to progress, to prosperity, to modernity, whatever, right? And modernity, as it liberates everyone, also give everyone the right to rise, right? And when too many rise together, there is bound to conflict, right? There is bound to be conflict. So I think that is what I will think I'll try to answer in this way.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Uh,
Profits from hate, yes, absolutely. There is the hate economy for
yeah.
sure.
Thank you, Dr. Vishesh, for engaging with us, for your great presentation and the number of questions that came. Thank you so much, participants. We are now going to close the session. If you have any other concerns, you can write to Dr. Vishesh Pratap Gurjar. We will, okay, people are still writing, but we'll have to close the session at some point of time. Why don't we, or would you like to take it, Vishesh?
I think what she is sharing is her own experience with the Ragini thing. Uh, I do, in fact, believe. See, I mean, Ragini has always been entirely male centered. I don't know what age you are, Tejaswini, but I think in the older generations, I have felt that when there was not many ways to entertain yourself, women were also going in groups in these Ragini competition and sitting there and enjoying. While the content of the Ragini was much more male oriented, and it always tell women to be in their space, place, because the rural morality is all about keeping them in control. So yes, you are correct. I mean, uh, as participant, they were, maybe you don't have that memory, but I have a very vivid memory of women coming in groups and sitting for a Ragini competition, at least in my part of the world. And I agree with you that in the Ragini they don't participate equally. That is for sure. That is for sure. Because most of the Ragini writers were male. Mhm. And they have to uphold a rural morality. Otherwise, they will not be popular in rural areas. Right? Maybe if you can just point me out towards some alternative forms of Ragini writing, which sort of tried to criticize the rural morality, that would in fact allow me to include them as well, in part of my presentation.
Thank you, Vishesh. Thank you, everyone, for participating. On behalf of the DARK, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our speaker today, Dr. Vishesh Pratap, for taking out the time, sharing his work, and also answering all our questions so patiently. Most of our audience is also a student who have engaged with your paper beforehand, so it also then helps very young students, undergrad students, master students to build some of these questions, but also understand how questions are framed and answered. In that sense, also, it's like a great pedagogical space, at least for us, to interacted with visual culture, consolidation of casteist culture and caste making. So thank you so much. Thank you
Thank you so much.
to Jigisha Bhargavi for being a discussant and raising pointed questions. All the participants who stood with us all this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jigisha. Thank you, Jigyasa, for inviting, and for all the audience who are there patiently listening to this talk, and much of my ideas are still taking shape. I'm sure I'll be reaching some place sometime soon, and will be publishing it as a piece somewhere. But thank you for the engagement, Jigisha, especially you for the questions, and others, Pratiksha and others who have raised the questions here. I think they will help me enrich my paper much more. It is now in a different. It is going to come out in a different shape, definitely, after this interaction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, then, everybody. A very good night to all of you, and we'll see all of you next Saturday.